Today's episode is brought to you by the Vegas Beer Guys and the Sounds in Cinema podcast.
Everything sequel contains explicit language. And why the fudge not, you melon farmer?
Hello and welcome to the Everything Sequel podcast. This is the Terminator edition. We're finally to Dark Fate. My name is Michael Shantz of the How Dare You Awards. The man you're waiting to hear from, who cannot be stopped, Tom Stewart of Lonesome Whistle Productions. Hello, Tom.
Future shit. I gotta say, this
succinct.
This for a science fiction movie, this is rather cavalier about speculative technology.
Future shit.
Also, a great alternate title for Salvation. Terminator Future Shit.
Terminator.
I think we would have
Future
enjoyed
shit.
that movie far more were we prepared in that manner.
Oh, that's great. Yes, indeed. Well, ladies and gentlemen, we are talking about Terminator Dark Fate, a 2019 film. We're talking just a few short years ago.
Yeah.
Directed by Tim Miller, who I have just listed as Deadpool, and that's about it.
Okay. Well, nothing. That's not to be sniffed at.
And yeah, I was just going to say, if that's... But it's just funny that seems to be the way directing is going now. You have a young director who makes one good or interesting film, and the next thing you know, they have the biggest budgeted film in Hollywood for their next film. I mean, that seems to be happening a lot.
Yeah, and you know, I don't think this. I mean, it's not a commercial failure, but it was certainly not what it was. It didn't do what it was supposed to do commercially, but artistically, I think people are pretty positive about this movie, right?
Yeah, I mean, it has 70% on Rotten Tomatoes.
Yeah, that's fair.
Which is
I don't disagree.
Clearly shows that it's stronger than most of the other sequels,
Right?
Which do not come to that mark. But like you said, it just feels like within this series that they are constantly trying to start from scratch and get a movie that will reinvigorate the series.
Right.
And financially, that just doesn't seem to ever happen after
Yeah.
Terminator 2.
And if it didn't happen with this movie, which is sort of bristling with interesting ideas,
Right.
it probably means
Probably not going to happen.
and it also probably means that you can't do it
Maybe.
without changing your approach, because one of my repeated notes here was, why do we have to make the timeline obsolete every time? Can we not have some level of continuity between these movies? We now have multiple timelines to choose from.
Yeah.
Do we really need to abandon all of them?
You're not going to like my pitch.
But that's a question we're going to have to answer in the pitching process that we've never encountered before. It's like, do you embrace the logic of the series, which is to start that kind of Etch-a-Sketch?
Well, that's where I started from, was because I had said the series doesn't care. Why the fuck should I?
That's true, but I think this is, also it's a series that's crying out for some degree of continuity. Unfortunately, their answer to the continuity question here is to do a direct sequel to Terminator 2. And actually, that's probably my least favorite quality of the movie.
Oh, interesting.
I think there's so much I like about this movie, and I think it's a very good movie. Mm-hmm. But the idea of it as a direct sequel to Terminator 2 is one of its more off-putting elements for me.
Well, now why is it off-putting?
I mean, not the idea
just
in essence.
Just because you love Terminator 3?
No. I think this is a perfectly legitimate counterpart to Terminator 3. I just, well, I'm skeptical about direct sequels. I think I've said that before. But I feel the way in which they
Well, and honestly,
handle the idea of continuing on from Terminator 2 is disingenuous.
mhm.
So in the in the end, you might as well you might as well not be a direct sequel for all the work they have to do to carry on from Terminator 2.
Yeah. Well, and the thing is, throughout the series, small choices matter.
Mm.
So if Terminator 3 didn't make the choice to reference only in dialogue and only by one line of dialogue saying, yeah, she's gone. Mom
Yeah.
died. And if this movie didn't decide to put such a young face in the flashback scene in Mexico
Right.
with Edward Furlong,
Uh-huh.
then Terminator 3 and this movie could exist in the same universe, you know? They could
That's
have.
true. And
So,
and it occurred to me,
but if you want to bring back Linda Hamilton,
yeah.
because of what Terminator 3 does, you have to kind of say, okay, fuck you.
But it's not, it's a sequel to the scene they created between Terminator 2 and this movie. That's what it's a sequel to.
Wait, say that again?
It's a sequel to the opening scene of the movie.
Oh, okay.
That's what it's a direct sequel to.
Right.
Because that narrative event is what this movie is about, but that doesn't happen in Terminator 2. That happens in the first scene of this movie.
Yeah.
It's a direct sequel to its own opening scene.
That's great.
And there's nothing in Terminator 2 that suggests it was going to go, the way it goes down at the beginning of this movie is going to happen at all. And that's why I think it's somewhat disingenuous as a direct sequel, because you have to do so much work to get to the point where you want to start from.
Well, yeah, I get what you're saying. The other thing is, but the things that they want to introduce into this movie that are far more progressive,
Yes.
people of color, women
Yeah.
far more at the forefront,
Yeah.
all of those are good
Representation,
things.
yeah.
Representation. And in order to do that, you do have to have that front seat. You know what I mean? You have to have that full setup.
Yeah, but it's interesting because but the counterpoint to that would be to say that actually jeopardizes the progressive message of the movie, because then the movie
I get what you're saying.
because
yeah.
then the movie becomes about how a kid was a young male white kid was shot in the early 90s.
Mm-hmm.
As opposed to letting these women have their own story. Because as the movie goes on, Danny, our new sort of, it keeps getting, cast into the role of John Connor.
Right.
And that limits our ability to see her as an independent heroine in her own right, I think.
Sure.
So I just think the whole idea, whether it is about how you do a direct sequel and how this movie addresses the idea of being a direct sequel, I think it hamstrings it in a way it didn't need to be hamstrung.
Okay.
But I mean,
well, and it just sort of, to me, it's sort
not
of
a big. It's actually also not a big deal.
yeah.
There's so many.
Yeah, right.
There's so much to compensate for it. It's fine.
There's so much that's good in this movie, but
Yeah.
do you feel? Because to me, it feels like there's a thin veil over the whole movie that says, "Look what we tried to do." In terms of representation. But I think what you're saying in terms of all of that hinging on the fact that poor white boy John died negates some of that, doesn't it?
I actually think on a micro level, its progressive elements are self-evident and overall successful. I think there are some narrative choices that make it more problematic than it needs to be, but I think on the whole they're definitely they're going in the right direction, and they're being radical, and they're addressing politics in a way we've never seen before in this series. I don't
Okay.
think in a way that James Cameron wasn't interested in Terminator 3. Arguably, was only interested in a satirical way. The last two movies have had zero interest in saying anything about anything other than
Right.
themselves. But this movie is set out with a different agenda, and I like the approach, and I also like the results a lot of the time. Even though there's, yes, it's 2019, but these problems still exist in Hollywood. Of it's like even the fact that you're doing a Terminator movie in 2019 shows that you're somewhat attached to heteronormative ideas of whiteness,
You're right.
because then you just wouldn't make a Terminator movie if you were really wanting to push back against that.
Well, and
So
I'm
this
sitting
needs
here...
to have it both ways, and it's actually an okay blend overall of traditional and new.
And what's interesting to me is that, okay, if you're looking at the sort of aggregate in terms of reviews,
Yeah.
this movie's far more successful. People liked this movie a
They did.
lot more.
Mm-hmm.
And I would go so far as to say that it's a way better movie than Terminator Salvation, of course, and Terminator Genesis.
Yes.
It far outpaces both of those movies. But
Yes.
interestingly enough, this movie had a budget of $185 million, an opening weekend of $29 million. In the USA, it only made $62.2 million, which is even less than Genesis and way less than Salvation. And both those movies, Salvation, almost $400 million, $371 million. And then Genesis, as we said, $440 million.
Yeah.
In the world, this movie only gets $261.1 million, which is kind of astonishing to me. That to me says everybody's just tired. There's
Yeah.
just
Yeah, I think
Terminator
it's-
fatigue.
It's pure fatigue, and it's not entirely inspired. It's tempting to sort of say, oh, it's a good movie, so everyone's making these judgments in spite of the movie. But even within the frame of the movie, I definitely have those moments as an audience member of thinking, can we try something else?
Mm-hmm.
It's it's like rival Terminators. One of them's trying to save someone, one of them's trying to kill someone. They're disguised as family members. They're introduced in exactly the same way. We get skulls in the water again. It's like, can we have more than like a cosmetic facelift for these movies? And when you add that to the idea of a direct sequel, you think, well, why are we bothering with a direct sequel if you're just going to make the same story scene choices that you made in the other sequels?
Right.
It's like, are you trying to do the same thing better, or are you trying to do something different? And I think probably, so it's fatigue and frustration, I think, is a big part of it as well. If you're solely looking at this as a
Right.
Terminator franchise entry.
Entity. Yeah.
If you turn off that part of, if you deactivate that chip, a la the Terminator 2 director's cut, which we did not watch, if you deactivate that chip in your brain, which apparently you can get to just by opening Arnie's head,
Right.
then you can have a really good time, and also you can, it's a really thought-provoking movie. But it's franchise frustrations, and I'll give you some more F's as well. It's the fundamental flaws and futility of direct sequels.
Wow.
That's what I think's overall going on here.
Well played,
it's
sir.
a shame. So it's not entirely in spite of the movie itself, but if you're willing to sort of play along, this movie has much more in store than the last two movies have given you.
Yeah, it has so much more to give than
Yeah.
the other two movies.
It does.
But I mean, it begs the question, and I guess we'll have to wait to hear our pitches in the next episode. But it does beg the question: what do you do then with the Terminator sequel?
It's over, I think.
Because by nature, there's always going to have to once in Terminator 2, you reset Arnie as the good guy.
Yeah.
If you want him in your picture, I mean, you could revert back if you wanted. He could just be a villain, but you've already
Well, they do. That's the first thing they do here.
Yeah.
By the way.
But yeah, you're right.
But then he's back into, his. I think what Terminator 2 did was,
and there are interesting things within the aspect of that choice within this movie that
most interesting part of
that
the movie.
I like. Yeah.
Most interesting. I mean, I don't think it's any secret that.
What does a Terminator with nothing to do?
Well, that's it. And Genesis started to ask. Actually, I thought about it, and in terms of like actually fulfilling on the promise of the Terminator sequels, the representation of Arnie's version of the Terminator is the most interesting, because we're told in Terminator 2 that this robot has the capacity to change and grow.
Yeah.
But each sequel has prevented us from seeing that.
Mm-hmm.
And we saw a glimpse of it in Genesis. But really more as a kind of novelty. But here, it's the essence of his
character,
of his appearance in the movie, and I think that's, to me, that's the most successful aspect of the movie, because that is a genuine callback to Terminator 2, where we were told, he could become like a person at some point. Mm-hmm. And here, I mean, he's more than a person by the time we meet him here.
Sure.
As well as being Arnold Schwarzenegger and commenting on what Arnold Schwarzenegger is now and how he's changed from what he has been. All of that is folded into beautifully to his scenes in this movie.
Yeah, agreed.
And that's like only half the story. The rest of it is about, Linda
Well,
Hamilton
and it's
Sarah
because
Connor.
it's one of those things where you see a preview for this movie, and what you're going to see is lots of Arnold.
Yeah.
And one of the things I like about this movie is, I mean, you don't see Arnold for a while. This movie's at least halfway done before you see him. And for me, I don't think there's a point where you're thinking to yourself, where the hell's Arnold?
No,
I want Arnold.
Yeah, everything that's happening is kind of arresting and interesting, and in terms of character,
yeah,
there's enough interesting new versions of old types of characters for us to kind of chow down on for a while before we even get to Arnie.
Now, are you like me? Does this movie call back? Because I feel this movie locksteps, and maybe it's because James Cameron's back as a producer, but to me, this movie locksteps with his first movie in terms of plot points as we go along. There are so many points in this movie where I think, well, that reminds me of this.
Well, not just, I mean, I would say more holistically kind of James Cameron's way of looking at the world.
Okay.
I just thinking about Danny, and even though she's not biologically a mother, and it's very important that she's not in this movie, the way she's first introduced as this kind of this
caretaker,
caretaker woman who takes care of everyone. I mean that's how James Cameron sees the maternal. It's not just about biology; it's about this kind of caretaker role. And it's it's like his women and older women in his movies are very proactive, and so I definitely got glimpses of that.
Well, one of the things that because we've been maybe talking around this sort of what's the difference between an 80s or a 90s movies and the movies today, and in the past I think we've talked about narrative, and maybe I might also be thinking about the How Dare You podcast, but because we come up with this all the time where 15, 20 minutes in, you know who everyone is and what's going on.
Yeah.
That happens a lot with 80s and 90s movies. Say with the Superman series, that's, you know, you have Superman's on his way to Earth in his star spaceship 10 minutes, 15 minutes max in that first Superman movie. In Man of Steel, I mean, we're 35 minutes on this fucking planet, that kind of thing.
Yeah.
And one of the things I really like about this movie, and kind of hearkening back to what I was just saying, was that this movie moves at a pace that seems to understand today's audiences, and yet I have the same feeling that I had in Terminator. So when Danny is at home and she leaves rather quickly, and then you see the bubble of evil Terminator. We've already had Grace. We've seen her appearance. So we've had that bit of Terminator business, right? Happens
Very
quickly.
much so.
Grace is here. She takes on some cops. You know, the bad Terminator's here. He's going to take over Dad, essentially. And all of that really made me hearken back to the original Terminator when he takes on Linda Hamilton's roommate and her boyfriend.
Yeah.
That felt very similar to me. But I noted that it happened so much quicker. Because we're 35 minutes deep into Terminator, maybe, before...
Oh, right.
Or, well,
Interesting.
20, 25 minutes at least.
So it's
before that roommate dies. And so it's all happening at a quicker pace, but the story is... I'm having the warm and fuzzy feelings about Terminator, and that to me is both interesting and successful in this movie, how they're able to do that.
And with David S. Goyer being the other major authorial voice, you've got to imagine that it's Tim Miller who's speeding things up, because we've done the Dark Knight films.
Right, exactly. He'll take his time.
Narrative economy is not in a David S. Goyer thing. But I guess that's a sort of
because some of my notes are under 15 minutes, major fight.
Yeah,
like we're at the factory. Bad guys there, Grace is there. Let's get the show on the road, and we have a major, shenanigan fest.
Yeah. Yeah.
And then what do you make of subtle differences? In previous films, the time bubble showing up seems to denote heat.
Right.
And in this movie, suddenly we got cold.
Okay. Well, yeah. I mean, it's all working within the same formula. I think that's the big problem with it. I mean, the female body fake out Terminator. We did this 2 decades ago in Terminator 3. Let's try something else. I like that we were doing more daytime stuff. I thought that was interesting.
Yeah, I did too.
The idea of getting the clothes from the washing line, and that we're in a building complex that doesn't seem to be like an apartment complex. Don't seem to have been in a place like that before. But it's still all very cosmetic. I think it takes a while for this movie to sort of shed some of that weight, that dead weight of the series and the images we're used to. I really don't think we need to see, like, the way this movie starts is very interesting to me. They do this kind of they put a VHS Instagram filter over the Paramount logo, coming out of the gates saying this is a direct sequel to an early 90s movie. It's pure imbas. Sequel is beginning with a recap,
right?
Of Linda Hamilton in the institution, the footage that was taken there, but fan footage. So I guess that's the modern twist on it. I don't know. Also, the return of Linda Hamilton as Sarah Connor, which is a big deal. And then we get the Sarah Connor voiceover, the skulls in the water. It's just the same set piece with only a slight adjustment each time. And then, probably the most important scene in the entire movie, which I wanted to ask you about. I don't know much about it, but it's a scene that I both like and dislike.
Oh, okay.
Which is we're in the beach in 1998.
Yeah. That's so funny you say that, because that scene's a real roller coaster, isn't it?
Yeah. Well, you see, so so are these? Is this digital de-aging?
Yeah.
Then all I have to say is wow.
Yeah.
This is literally the best I have ever seen that process.
Because
I was like, wow. This is my first thought. Linda Hamilton has aged really well. That was my first thought.
But you're going to see her a few minutes later.
Who needs Amelia Clarke? She could have done Genesis. But then I was like, oh. And then I thought, so was this a deleted scene was this an alternative ending to Terminator 2? Because...
Oh, wow.
Well, that was my second thought. I don't know for sure. Because I was like, I cannot not tell that these are digital people. And I have honestly never felt like that before.
Well, with her
It's...
and John all agree, and then Arnie shows up, and for the briefest of moments, I think, oh, that looks...
Okay.
And I'm about to say terrible, and then I look again, and I go, that looks pretty good.
It does. I mean, and we've seen it, we've seen it go from, Uncanny Valley, like, one step above, what's that Robert Zemeckis movie with the terrible motion capture? With Ray Winston pretending he looks like Sean Bean. Well, I don't know everything about this movie except the
yeah.
It's a famous legend.
Beowulf,
there we go.
Yeah.
Where it's like, laughably awful motion capture.
Right.
And that's where we kind of started. Like Salvation is exactly like that as well.
Mm-hmm.
And here I'm like, this looks totally legitimate to me.
Completely.
This could be like a, I was like, is this digital capture, or is this a scene that they filmed and never used? Like, what is this?
Mm-hmm.
But conceptually, I just think if you have to sort of essentially retcon the last movie, how is it a direct sequel to the last movie?
Right.
Because the point of Terminator 2 is that John survives.
Exactly.
And here, what they do here is they have John
And so that's
Connor
the
die.
thing, because when I saw this the first time in the theater, so jarring.
And, Arnie's
and
the villain
it
again.
also seems...
We're bad Terminator.
Yeah. So that's what I meant by roller coaster ride, because you're just kind of there are points where you're saying wee, and then you go down and think, oh, come on, and then you go back
John
up. And
should be past puberty by now, but let's
right,
I mean,
exactly,
whatever. You shouldn't have made it. I don't know why it had to be 1998.
And
again, don't be so specific. Rocky 3 all over again. Don't be so specific. Don't say the year, and we're all happy.
I would give this movie more of a break if it was, say, made around 2003, but because it's made around 2019,
yeah. Because it's
the idea of killing off John like that after everything you went through with those characters in Terminator 2 feels like such a big fuck you.
And also, if you're doing a homage to, if James Cameron is producing and you're trying to make this more Cameroonian than the series has been,
coin it.
then why are you pulling this Alien 3 shit?
Yeah, exactly.
I mean, this is what David Fincher did to
Michael Biehn,
to Aliens, isn't it?
Yeah.
He's like, okay, these characters survived the movie. We're gonna kill them off between this movie and the next one.
Yeah, exactly. Right.
It's fascinating to me, and I get that this is the point of where they want. This is
well, like I was saying earlier. That's what you have to do to set this movie where you want to set it with the characters you want to begin your story with.
Yeah.
So, look, this is a good start.
It is.
Why don't we take a break?
Yeah.
Well, why don't we take a break and then we'll come back? How about that?
Absolutely.
All right. Right after this.
I like to think I know something about beer, but nowadays even I get overwhelmed when confronted by the exhaustive selection of craft beers they have at bars, breweries, and even grocery stores. Back in the day you had one, maybe two craft beers to choose from, and if you were confused, you ordered a Guinness. But in beerstinations like San Diego, the craft beer options lately are in double, sometimes even triple digits. So what's a beer drinker to do? You need what I need, the Vegas Beer Guys. Your beer of choice should be a perfect blend of malt and hops. And so a live show about beer needs that same balance. And the Vegas Beer Guys matches beer expert Dan Aker with self-proclaimed beer novice Stephen J. Weiss. The results are eminently drinkable. They're on Facebook, they're on Instagram. They'll try new beers, they'll tell you about beer. Think of them as your beer Sherpas guiding you up a foamy-headed mountain to reach the peak of your pint. God, I need a beer.
And we're back, ladies and gentlemen. Tom and I are here, traveling back into time. Back to time? Well, I don't know.
It's nothing matters anymore.
Yeah.
After Genesis, nothing matters anymore.
Needless to say, we're talking about Terminator Dark Fate. What do you make of that title, by the way?
I'm still mulling it over.
Isn't it one of those things that sounds good, but you don't know what the hell it means exactly?
It also, I mean, not that I wanted it to be darker fates,
Right,
but
yeah.
I gotta say, there's been some pretty dark fates in this series so far, right?
Yeah.
In fact, there was never not a dark fate.
It's always dark.
Yeah. It's whatever you do to try and prevent it, machines
Will not,
will,
yeah,
at one point,
will not work
at one point, all
eventually.
get together and destroy us.
Yeah.
It's just about where and when that happens that changes.
Right.
And this movie is no different. And that's why it's also weird that it's a direct sequel, because its message is exactly the same
Right.
about the future.
Well, let's start with, like you said, this movie primarily starts during the day.
Yeah.
Which
that's a
also,
good choice, I thought.
not as a callback exactly. I mean, the Terminator shows up at night in the last movie, but we get him during the day the next morning.
Yeah.
And it feels like that. But the other thing that I really like, especially moving this story to Mexico, I just really appreciate that we see people living in their apartment building, a factory that, looks like the kind of place anybody would want to work in any country. It's not represented as dirty. It's not represented as less than. It's not represented as breaking down and useless. It's represented exactly as it should be.
Did this come out the same year as Last Blood?
Ooh.
Rambo Last Blood? Pretty close, right?
Yeah, I'd have to... I want to say 2018 on Last Blood, but...
This is the flip side of the Mexico shown in
Yes,
Last Blood.
exactly right.
And maybe this is too idealized, but that's okay. Because...
Oh, you're right, 2019.
But it actually isn't.
2019, same year.
Oh, there you go. Same year. Yeah, well, you couldn't get two more different Mexicos.
Yeah, exactly.
And all for the better, because this speaks to a greater truth. And also, in terms of the themes of the series, the idea of, someone losing their job to a robot is so on point.
Yeah, right.
In a way that, I mean, I guess it's on the nose, but it's a reality.
Well, it feels like it's too
reality.
on the nose for a Terminator movie, but it's exactly what would happen.
It's exactly what would happen, right? So it's a reality that people in manufacturing face every day,
Sure.
and I think that's what I appreciated about it, because whenever the Terminator franchise tries to update the machine threat for whatever age we're living in,
Mm-hmm.
I feel that it's kind of very clunky, very artificial. This felt like it genuinely was. It wasn't like it had a contemporaneity about it. It wasn't just a general idea of the internet has changed things.
Yeah,
you
right.
know? This was like, I was like, this, people are facing this every day now. This is genuinely where machines are trying to destroy us in our daily lives.
Yeah, exactly.
Right? It's a labor issue.
Yeah.
And it's kind of the first time we've addressed that, which is again interesting given
I
that
was
this
just
is a
gonna
series
say
about machines killing the human race.
They-
The first time we're really getting to grips with the labor issues around
It's
this.
just funny that it took until 2019 for the series itself to comment on it at all.
Yeah, and that's I guess, and one of the other interesting things, even though we do the same kind of, oh look, a hot woman just appeared and she's naked shtick from Terminator 3, we get rid of that pretty quickly, and because in Terminator 3, the new the Terminatrix, as she's called in the movie, never gets beyond the point where you can separate her sexuality from her badassness. But
Yeah, it separates
very
here pretty
quickly,
quick.
Grace is
She's gonna
like,
put on clothes, and she's all business.
And the idea of women as sexual beings in all
She's
senses
not gonna
of the
dip her
world
finger.
is absent from the rest of the movie.
She's not gonna.
I thought,
Yeah. She's not gonna dip.
that's what I
dip her finger into things and slowly, put things in her mouth.
exactly in a leather cat suit.
Yeah.
Yeah, but that's this movie is systematically, in a kind of Bechdel test kind of way, sort of stripped away any notion of women as sexual beings. The fact that they're there to give birth to men, that they're there as sex objects. One of the best choices.
All
of this movie,
all the
and it's
characters
skipping
that are female, it's incidental.
Yes.
They just happen to be women.
Right. Yeah. There's nothing biologically attaching them to their characters. And I think it was a great choice. There's so many opportunities in this movie, and I think, and I try to remember, but I think they do sink this low in Salvation. If not, they had a conversation about it. that when they're traveling across the border, there's no sexual threat against these women.
Yeah, right.
I can see a worse movie in which they're constantly being like
Looked up and down, and
the threat of rape.
yeah,
is kind of
I'll get you across the border, but
right, but again, Last Blood,
right,
and I'm pretty sure that happens in Salvation at one point.
Does it?
As far as I remember, there is some like sexual rape threat against like a woman who's out on her own, and the fact that this movie
I think Moonblood, I think.
Yeah,
she happens across some shitty men.
Right. Yeah. Supergirl style. But
right.
This
I should say
movie,
McG style. Thank you, Tim Miller.
Yeah, representationally, this movie makes a lot of the right moves.
Yeah.
In ways that even movies in 2019 haven't still got to grips with.
And it's got to be conscious, right? I mean, we're several years after Me Too, and so the people making the film just are smart enough, right, to say, we're not going to be doing that shit.
And even to the level that they've thought about how it might be offensive to transgender or non-binary people that the cyborg characters in the movie are treated as non-human.
Mm-hmm.
Like, this movie even thinks about that in the way it represents Grace.
Yeah.
Like, it's like, no, I'm human. I'm augmented.
Yeah. Right.
So if you're a person in the audience who's thinking about, changing your gender you currently have, or you don't want to engage in gender at all,
I'm still exactly who I am.
Yeah. Than saying, you have metal parts, you're a monster.
Right.
right? Which is also a very ableist point of view. So I think they're just thinking differently about representation in a way that is both interesting because you have to do it within the formula of the series.
Well, that's one of the things that really bothers me about this movie is because they're making all of those good choices.
Yeah.
And like I said, critics like this movie, but it kind of bums me out that fewer people saw this movie than saw the last two movies.
Yeah.
That's disappointing.
That is very disappointing, yeah.
Well, and let me ask you this. Just kind of moving on. We were talking earlier about the pace at which the movie moves, and like all Terminator movies, you've referenced the sense in they're always moving forward.
On the go.
They're always on the go.
Exposition on the go, yeah.
And this movie is no
except for Salvation,
right,
but as we've said, that's not a Terminator movie, and it's not a movie.
It's not a movie
so
either.
You can't apply the same standards.
But what I do find interesting is that it moves at such a pace that the characters, I think, are never allowed to catch up to the terrible things that happen. Danny has to watch her brother die. And it's like, get out of the car. We got to go.
And I think
there's no time to even reference back to it, to have a breakdown about it, there's nothing that sets in emotionally from losing both your father and your brother within minutes.
Yeah, and I think
so does the movie suffer from that?
Yes.
Okay.
And another example of that is, I think it's a story problem, and again, it's not taking advantage of that 30-year gap you have.
Yeah.
Because you're a direct sequel, because you're saying nothing in between counts.
Right.
Yeah, and that's why Arnie in this movie works so well, because it's all about what happened in that space of time that creates the character.
Yes.
And yet Danny transforms from one kind of character to another kind of character in a matter of days.
Yes, right.
And it's like yeah, I mean that's a genre
well, and that's
thing,
one of the other things that
but
right.
You've got 30 odd years of time in which you could have turned into this person. You're just not taking advantage of it. It's like you're doing all the wrong direct sequel things and not taking advantage of the things where a direct sequel might actually be an advantage to you storytelling wise.
And so it's funny because what you're saying is sort of, I don't know, it's one of those regrets that hangs with me when I watch this movie. When she saves Grace, essentially, in the flash forward at the end of this movie, there's nothing, I won't say that there's nothing, but I'm not sure that there's enough in this movie to show me her transition. I don't know, maybe that's unfair. I guess I'm thinking, because at the very least, I know that's...
I think it's a blind spot.
I think it's a blind spot. You're right, because I know at least it's taking place in the future, so I know that she can become that person. But what I think the first Terminator does so well is Linda Hamilton is this, vivacious, happy-go-lucky kind of, I'm a young adult, just living my life. And by the end of that movie, when she says, "Get up, soldier," it's completely earned.
Yeah.
She has become the Linda Hamilton or the Sarah Connor that in that moment she becomes the Sarah Connor we're going to see in the next movie. Right then.
Yeah.
And it feels earned. And all of these sequels and this one too don't feel like they earn it in the same way.
Well, they do with this one does with our two major legacy characters, I think.
Mm-hmm. Oh, no, yeah.
And what it
because I'm not talking about Arnold. Everything with Arnold is
and
Sarah.
And Sarah, yeah. With Danny, certainly.
But I just mean with our new characters.
I got to say though, this is the second Terminator movie in a row where, speaking of the flash forward to the future, they have managed to do salvation. They've managed a successful do-over of salvation in one scene.
Right.
Like they basically do the entirety of Salvation in one scene. And that's when it clicked to me. I was like, I've solved Salvation. It's a set piece in a movie. It's a scene in a movie that is feature length.
Right.
This is what it should have been. Like everything, the fact that it looked like modern day warfare, even though it was the future.
Yeah.
I was like, that's exactly what Salvation was going for.
Right.
It's like, it's so easy when someone like just shows you what it should have been.
And this movie shows you in 3.5 minutes.
Yeah.
Oh, that's funny.
But I mean, I probably have some mixed feelings about Sarah Connor in this movie. None of them are to do with Lyndall Hamilton's performance, which I think is extraordinary.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's leaning a little too into 2017 Halloween's Laurie Strode. I think it's hard to see
2018?
Yeah, or whatever. It's hard to see how that didn't shape how they represent her in this
That's
movie.
interesting. Yeah.
The conspiracy stuff, the hunting, the trauma victim stuff, like fighting back. I don't know. It's too close in time and too close in genre.
Yeah, that's what I was just gonna say.
Coin.
Because you don't know to what extent the filmmakers of this movie, where they were in their process when they started filming, when they were writing, when that movie came out, because this is just the next year.
But the success of that movie and the success of relaunching Rory Stewart, it's got to have been
an influence,
boost to go in that direction. Yeah. But you know, in terms of, but again, it's so, like as with Arnie in this movie, it's a genuine extrapolation of where she would be given the events that have occurred. Unfortunately, the events that have occurred probably shouldn't have happened.
Right. Yeah. Right.
Happened in this movie. But nonetheless, that she's where you expect her. She's picking up from what we last saw. I think also this movie blows her first appearance in the modern day not being her entrance in the movie, because she has such a cool modern day entrance in the movie. It's like, oh well, why didn't we save the
flashback for later,
the flashback and the recap, so this is the first we see of her, because it undoes everything that's cool about it if you know it's like the third or fourth time you've seen her in the movie.
And the other thing is that
And when Arnie appears, I get apart from the 90s Terminator, but it's a totally different guy.
Right,
you know what I mean? It's like, and she's narrating it at the beginning, and anyway.
Well, and isn't it more effective?
Yeah, I think it's just better storytelling.
Modern day audiences are gonna know probably, okay, Edward Furlong's not in it. Clearly we have a new hero. You know that from a preview going in, but still
and they killed him in Genesis anyway.
True.
So they've already jumped that hurdle.
Yeah.
So it's an audience. I don't think.
But narratively, it's still more interesting to never have seen her and to be asking yourself what happened to John, what's going on,
right. That's
and
it.
Then to find out later.
And further to that point, I think what they choose to have the mysteries they choose to have in this movie hinder the movie.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas that mystery would have been
welcomed,
that would have sustained dramatic interest. I think one of the false moves of this movie is to hide the fact from us that Danny is the new Messiah, not because she gives birth to a Messiah, but because she is the Messiah. And I don't know why the movie holds on to that secret for so long.
Until till the last 10 minutes.
Because the fact that that's hidden from me from so long makes you think, oh, is Hollywood going to keep making the same mistakes and just making it all about gender and biology? So that's the
thing that upsets me about it, because
why do I even need to think about that? You can just tell me it's not true.
In 2019, when I see this movie in the theater, it's not a secret. You're holding something from me that I know.
Right.
I had figured that out.
Well, I also thought they might not go through with it, and maybe the studio.
Now that would have been upsetting. Yeah.
Right, but there's no reason to hold on to that piece of information.
Right.
And not tell the viewer at the exact moment when they're covering why she is so important in the
Don't
future.
they try to cover it just by having Grace say, you told me
And
not
then
to
they
tell you?
And I think they get interrupted. I think there's like an explosion or
Okay.
something that interrupts, and so it's kind of it's strange. And again, like, you know, it undoes that progressive, because the actual storyline itself is great.
Yeah.
But you have to come out and say it for it to have its true impact and power.
Mm-hmm.
If you hold on to it and make a secret of it, it becomes a plot point, right? It becomes like
right.
like a tricksy bit of writing.
I mean,
It's not a
even though
tricksy bit
in
of
the
writing.
first...
It's direct, you know, political storytelling.
Right. Even though in the first Terminator, it does have to do with your being a mother. So,
Yeah.
but it's not like they're holding on to that information until the last 2 minutes of the movie. John,
But
or
but
not
that's
John,
such a-
but Reese
yeah.
comes back and tells her, you're the key to the entire future.
Right.
You know, because that's
Right.
pertinent
But
information to
yeah.
have. You must
Well,
live.
It's disingenuous in that way, but I think, and again, it's like not knowing how good an idea you have,
Mm-hmm.
in a sense,
Right.
because it's like, well, what's the point of making a Terminator movie in 2019? Because then we can show that women's value is not just as mothers,
Right.
that they can take the future into their own hands. It's not about the men they produce. It's
Danny
about
can
them.
teach others how to
Yeah.
smash those metal motherfuckers into, scrap metal.
So why be bashful about
And
that?
now that I
That's-
think about it, Tom,
Oh dear.
I've just had a thought that feels a little bit, that renders the entire series a bit ridiculous.
The entire series.
Yeah,
Okay.
just because one kid dies, you're telling me
Hmm.
nobody else would stand up and say, hey, we got to take on these metal motherfuckers if we want to live.
Well, that's another huge political shortcoming of the
Yeah.
series, because it's endorsing a great man theory of history, isn't
Right.
it? Which is in itself quite a fascist idea.
A great white hope.
Yeah.
Wow.
And this movie does away with the white part and the male part of that.
Mm-hmm.
So in this instance, I think it could have handled it better. But overall, I'm still,
Yeah, I'm still happy as a
impressed.
clam that this movie does go where it goes. There
I'm
are just
still,
they're they're just tweaks. There's just a few things in this movie. I want that screenplay to somebody to take one more
Yeah.
pass because it's so close.
And speaking of sloppiness, I think the way Sarah's brought into the movie is a little lazy. She just she accidentally wanders into the plot.
Well, it's not accident. I mean, you find out later that it's not accidental. But what do you make of that plot point?
But she's hunting Terminators. She doesn't know any of this shit's going on.
Right.
So she's just like, you got that Terminator stuff in you. I don't know. I thought it was a little bit.
No, because I know what you mean.
Yeah.
Because even when you find out the explanation,
Yes.
there's sort of a nagging question in your mind of, this feels very convenient.
Yeah. I just wish she was more organic to
But,
this storyline, and that would have helped me
Yeah.
like embrace it more as a Terminator movie. Like there's a reason for Sarah Connor being there beyond,
retribution.
Linda Hamilton's willing to come
Well,
back
yeah,
as Sarah
right,
Connor,
yeah.
which is kind of what it felt
Yeah.
like. Not that I want the movie to be without that, but I think they could do better by her.
Well, and that's the thing. It's one of those screenwriter need to solve a problem. Look, we're taking this movie in a new direction. We're not going to have Edward Furlong come back. We have a new hero. Danny's going to be the Messiah. And so we have to solve these problems. And granted, they're not the easiest problems to solve.
No.
And
you probably shouldn't be telling this story again.
Yeah,
that's my overall note is like, there's got to be another story within this than robots from the future come back. One's trying to kill, one's trying to save. That's what we're dealing. I don't
However,
know why we have to
Tom-
keep going back to the well
Right.
like that. I like.
however, Tom, I'll say this. They tried once to do something completely different, and
Yeah,
it was
you're right.
the, abject failure of the entire series.
But that movie's an anomaly in so many ways. I think it's absolutely possible
To do.
Yeah, when you understand filmmaking to make a movie, you know what I mean.
Yeah.
I think it's a totally. I know what you're saying, and you're right to bring it up, because you absolutely could call me out on
Right.
that. But at the same time, I'm just, that is, whatever the opposite of a magical elixir is what that movie has. A shit elixir.
Yeah. A shit poison. Drink some of this shit, you'll feel better.
And I mean, once
Now, what do you make? Well, go ahead.
Go on. Well, I was just gonna say, I was calling back to, I think in the previous episode where you said that the border border detainee camp in this movie was a kind of inversion of a police station.
Yeah.
And I was like, oh, I didn't notice. I have that note, so apparently I did notice, and I forgot. I said, we're finding a way to, but I think it's because it's a relevant update. It's a relevant and important update.
So I took it as that the first time I watched this movie. I never made the connection. It felt far more relevant, and it seemed like, of course, the perfect place for the movie to go.
Yeah.
It was on this second viewing, watching for this, where I thought, oh, wow, this is really just an inversion.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't even know if it goes far enough to be an inversion. They're detained, It's just in a,
But yeah, but they are, it's, again, that added on to the way that the images of human cattle that we've seen in the series are turned into something that actually burns into, contemporary horror
right.
of the real world. Again, that's a connection that we've never made before in this series.
Sure.
We've had an old lady in a cage.
Right.
That's about as broad as it. That was as broad as it got. This is incredibly specific to the point of where they're not allowed to call them prisoners; they have to call them detainees. Yeah. When I heard that line, I thought, oh well, this is pointed,
right,
and rightfully pointed, because this is human rights atrocity.
But again, it also had that feeling of, that scene in the first Terminator of them being caught in a police station, because, I mean, the one thing that happened, when Kyle Reese gets caught, you think two things: oh no, and it's bad, but it's safe. And then all of a sudden, Arnold Schwarzenegger walks in and says, I'll be back.
Yeah.
And all bets are off. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And that's one of the things that I like about this Terminator, or that Terminator, the original Terminator. And this movie harkens back to that in a lot of ways.
Yeah.
Those feelings, at least.
Yeah.
But then once again, because we're going at the full stop, or rather the no stop, go mentality, you think, oh no, they're detained. Oh no, they're never going to convince anybody of what's going on. And then they just get out of it. I mean, we're talking a total of 7 or 8 minutes of screen time. You know what I mean? They're on a chopper real quick. And so that problem is solved fairly quickly.
Yeah, it's the injustice is raised, but it's not dealt with within the frame of the narrative. I think it works better on the other side with the Terminator Predator, because given that there's so much of this, so much kind of for want of a better word, anti-modern America commentary in here. The fact that this Terminator is able to freely move through modern America thanks to this kind of boys' club at every step of the way was brilliant. I mean, as an alternative to kind of mayhem and carnage wherever they go, the Robert Patrick way. I mean, he's just like learning the lingo.
But at the same time, he leaves mayhem behind him. Just
Yeah. But he's also just kind of like, yeah, Bud didn't do the. It's like Bud didn't do the paperwork, but I can go through here,
Right.
and it's like that's how white people get away with everything anywhere. Yeah. So
all good stuff.
I think all good stuff.
All right. Well, let's take another break, and then we'll come back and we'll finish up.
We'll talk about.
Oh, there's more to talk about.
We'll talk about the star of this movie.
All right.
Awesome. Certainly the star of this franchise.
Sure. All right. Right after this. If you like podcasts like I do, boy, do I have a treat for you. You need to
Stay on target.
and check out the Sounds and Cinema podcast. Listen as your host, sound designer and music creator Tony Parham, and co-host, musical performer and sound lover Derek Hansen, D-Rock if you're nasty, and I am, discuss all things sound related to film, television, stage, and theatrical productions. They discuss environmental sounds, bioacoustics, dialogue, the nature of communication through sound, but as an added bonus, they drink beer and try to
Stay on target.
find them wherever you get your podcasts and listen to the pure mania of a man who can charitably be described as Doug, the dog from Up, and another man with a soothing and sultry voice trying to get that man to
Stay on target.
That's the Sounds and Cinema podcast. Tune in and listen to the sounds they are creating just for you. And we're back once again, ladies and gentlemen. Tom and I are here finishing up with Terminator Dark Fate, the 2019 film directed by Tim Miller. Well, as you mentioned before we went on a break, we're about at the place we've taken as long to talk about the star of this movie as the movie takes to put him in the movie.
Yeah. But it's worth the wait.
And I mean, I know we talked about this before, but I think that's like a tip of the hat to this movie to be able to not have Arnold Schwarzenegger appear until well into a halfway through your movie, and at least for me, not ever, find myself saying, "Where the hell's Arnie?" He's not missed and he's not needed until he shows up.
Yeah, and they pack a lot in when he's on screen.
Mm-hmm.
Like you get so much from his supporting character appearances in this movie that you don't miss him as the star.
Yeah.
I mean, it just all my notes are, his growth as an actor is just, to me, astonishing. I mean, I don't know if I said this on air, but the turning point for me was The Expendables. I saw, like, for the first time, Arnold is making real actor choices on screen in that cameo in that movie. And I hadn't seen him in a movie for years. And then Genesis, I was blown away by what he achieved in that movie. Especially with all the chaos going on around him.
I was just going to say, considering what's going on in the movie, he's the breath of fresh air.
And in this movie, everything is just more so. He's managed to turn this kind of robot deadpan into like a low-key, laconic acting style.
Yeah.
He can do... I mean, he's been playing this role for a long time, but he can now say everything with like a few looks.
Mm-hmm.
And it's about how he's developed as an actor. The movie is itself referencing, the Americanization of this Austrian bodybuilder,
Right.
the fact that he's kind of blended into American society. He owns a mobile business. He watches football. He has a family.
But then there are also great jokes. Does your
the
wife
comedy
ever
is
notice
the
that
most
you weigh
successful
800
it's
pounds?
ever been in the series. Even for someone who loves Terminator 3, the comedy is the comedy surrounding Arnie in this movie is the most successful that we see. And yeah, it brings that character growth that we've been promised to fruition. And he's been reset as a villain, and now he has to prove that he's a hero again. Which it's interesting. I mean, it's disingenuous because he's made a villain in a very artificial way, so that's a problem. But,
yeah.
I understand why they want that to be their starting point, because then
it feels like a means to an end because it is. But
it is, yeah. So he can have conflict with Sarah. Because otherwise Sarah is coming out of T2 going,
hey, you on my side or what?
Terminators. Yeah, that kind of Terminator's okay.
Yeah, right.
Now she's a full-on Terminator racist again because of what he did, and as clunky and as flip-floppy as that is, it works for it gives them something.
It mostly works, but because of Terminator 2, you also have to acknowledge the fact that she does tell him, or rather he does tell her at a certain point, yeah, I'm the Terminator that killed John.
Yeah.
But when she sees him in the doorway, she doesn't know that.
I suppose not.
And all he is a Terminator who appears to live in a log cabin, which seems fairly benign.
Right.
So, given the experience, that level of bile and hate, but it's like I give the movie a break because he was the Terminator that did kill him, and she seemed to intuit that, and okay, fine, but whatever.
And it's another course correction for Genesis, because Sarah's so attached to the Terminator. She's she has the relationship that John has with the Terminator in Terminator 2.
Right.
So this is probably too much in the other direction, but it's the better direction, I think. Otherwise, if they're just getting on all the time, I mean, that really does only work for one movie. In the frame of Terminator 2, having had a movie where she was running from him the whole time, now that they're partners, you can only do that once.
Yeah.
That's the lesson of these movies. You can only do certain things once. But we've done them like 5 or 6 times. And
like I said earlier, what do you do?
But this is all interesting stuff.
Yeah.
With because it's something we've only hinted at before, which is that once the Terminator's mission's over, what happens, what becomes of them. We know that their character can grow, their understanding of emotion can grow.
Right.
And as Arnie says, I'm reliable, a good listener, and extremely funny.
That's good stuff.
It's very good, and he's a draper as well, which is a really an interesting and unexpected choice.
There's much more to it than just picking the right color. It's the texture, the weight of the material. One wrong choice,
You okay?
it can destroy the look of the entire room.
Fine.
There was this one customer that came to me. He wanted to have solid colored drapes in a little girl's room. I said, don't do it. You need butterflies, polka dots, balloons.
And it's really, and I think all those elements combined, it's this sort of sweet spot of comedy and drama. Like it's in terms of the way Arnold is configured as the Terminator in these movies. To me, this is the ultimate sweet spot. It's sort of like it's almost like registering the fatigue.
Yeah, right.
That people have had with these sequels within the frame of the movie. And I think that's why the Arnold character is the most successful in the movie, because he embodies some of that melancholy. Whereas the rest of the movie is kind of pretending that melancholy doesn't exist.
Right.
That this is all new, that this is something that we've never done before. But Arnie's part of it is like those 30 years.
Yeah, he's putting on glasses, but this time they're stars.
That's a great moment for a totally different reason, and you know it. And that was cruel to bring that way. Just to
stick it to you.
Yes, to stick it to me. So yeah, I had nothing but good things to say. There's even, I think, an Eraser reference in here, and if that's the case, well played. I think when he's flying through the plane, the first thing I thought was the movie Eraser.
Yeah, right.
Well, Arnold Schwarzenegger, isn't he like caught in the thruster? Doesn't he like spin around in midair?
Specifically in the thruster? Oh, it's been a while.
But I just
I'm
thought
sure I'll have
about-
to watch it at some point with Chew on the other podcast.
And I mean, maybe again, that's the Tim Miller of it all, to sort of like a guy who's grown up with Arnie movies making.
Well,
Arnie
and so
movies.
let me ask you about that, because that's the one moment in this movie where I started to get set piece fatigue, was in the airplane set piece.
I generally don't like a lot of the CGI in the action sequences.
Yeah. Because again, we go back to
Action jumping
CGI,
the digital jumping
CGI
is
heavy
very-
planes and helicopter shit that just,
the
I'm surprised to
jumping is-
say, frankly, still doesn't look good even in 2019.
No. It's also too dark, which is the David S. Goyer of it all, I think, is like... there's someone saying, "What's happening?" And I had exactly the same note. Just like, yeah, it's too dark for me to see what's going on either. I think the action is a little antiseptic. CGI has a big part to do with that. But also, I think, you can see the difference in Terminator 2 between someone who knows how to kind of push through on an action sequence versus
Right.
someone who does it quite clinically. Like, it's clean and effective, but it doesn't hit you it doesn't hit you with that punch that the Cameron action sequences do. I think.
Right.
That's what I'd say is the big. And yeah, overall lacks a visceral quality. I think there's again.
Right,
like
that's what it is.
Yeah.
And I think that
kill box
goes back to the
sequence.
CGI of it all.
It's also about choices beyond that. I think with the kill box sequence, I thought I like this kind of gang torture idea, but I want it to be like you need to go into the David Cronenberg territory for this to feel. You need to like lean into the body horror of it, and if you don't, it's just it's just too antiseptic for me. I did kind of like I liked, on an ideas level at least, the robot Caesarean.
Oh my gosh, I was just going to ask you, what do you think of the Rev 9, being able to split?
Because it was like I thought it was like a good... It was like this movie wanted to put the idea of motherhood and female biology somewhere in the movie, and I think this was the right place for it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But it's just
that's all
funny in the sense, to me, because I thought, like you, I think it was a good idea, but when the T-1000 shows up, at some point, a character asks, is he like you? No, he's metal. And you get a little explanation as to what's going on. You don't really ever get that explanation in this movie. You don't get how or
visual,
why. It's just
isn't it?
visually given to you.
Yeah, and for a lot, you're absolutely. I had the note very early on in the movie. I was like, "What beyond the superficial?
What does this
different
do
about-"
for the robot?
Right.
It just
we
means
see
you
it
have to fight
visually,
two
but
of them. I take it.
It's a kind of mapping technology almost, isn't it? It's like you can map yourself onto someone, and also remain the robot.
Yeah, right.
So you get to be an outer body, but the advantages of that are not made clear, and I guess that's the advantage of a more sort of like an early 90s movie version of this. It's someone tells you, it's like Gremlins. Someone comes out and tells you the rules at the beginning. The Chris Columbus school of, here's the rules of the movie. You're even calling them rules.
Yeah.
No one's being mealy-mouthed about this kind of stuff.
Don't allow that robot to split after midnight. They'll never get back together.
Don't get Terminators wet. So, yeah.
Now, I'm trying to piece together when Danny is target shooting. I mean, we're going back to meeting Arnie and before the plane sequence, but
Yeah.
I mean, isn't there a moment where it's more? I don't remember the exact line, but she becomes a better shot after practicing once, doesn't she?
Yeah. Yeah.
And this is the sort of thing in a movie that, I don't know, it kind of drives me nuts. It's like the Django Unchained effect. You're not that good of a shot naturally. You have to work at it.
Yeah.
And at least I guess they show Django practicing, but
Well, and that's, it's a different kind of movie. I think this isn't.
yeah, I
I don't
accept
know.
it easier in Django than I do in this movie.
Yeah, exactly. Especially when you have so much time and the possibility of multiple timelines to
Right.
play with to get you to wherever you want to be, character-wise. So yeah, I do agree. It's a little strange.
It's ever so slightly off-putting.
The other off-putting, some of the my quotable was had
Right.
a little flavor of
Yes.
this. Was the sort of what I like to call Whedonisms, where people seem to be in life or death situations, but they talk flippantly about what's going
That's
on.
great.
Which is what Joss Whedon. It's the baseline of Joss Whedon dialogue.
Right.
Seems to me. It's like the post-credit shawarma scene in dialogue.
Well, and the more we start learning about him, the less enamored we are.
Yes. I'm going to address the criticisms by saying I'm completely innocent. Right? That's what I got from that statement. And lines like, at least I still have all my face.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
It's. I don't think, and maybe that's the Deadpool connection too.
Yeah.
It's like that sort of that kind of sarcastic, sassy.
But that has always helped when Ryan
Backchat.
Reynolds is in your movie.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah, it's kind of caught between those poles, isn't it? A little bit tonally
Mm-hmm.
of what wanting to be sort of irreverent towards the idea of a Terminator movie, and yet wanting to do a really
Right.
legit version of a Terminator movie at the same time. But again, these are just tweaks. These are just like,
Sure.
we probably don't need that line. We probably don't need that tone at that place. But I'm not. I'm not. It doesn't ruin my viewing experience.
No. And I'll tell you the other thing that I do think this movie does well. So Linda Hamilton she has a great line when she says, when all of this is over, it's you and me. I'm going to kill you, And Schwarzenegger just has to give her the stare. And I think he says, I know, right?
Yeah.
And
He also says, "I won't be back,"
right.
which is, it's. I mean, characters saying versions of the same lines over and over again has become a tiresome tradition of the series. But that might be my favorite.
But
I won't be
when
back.
it does work, it works fine.
And it's true.
Right.
He probably won't be back. There won't be another Terminator, I don't think, in the near future.
But I do think this movie earns, and maybe it's just because Linda Hamilton is Linda Hamilton and she's so good, but I do think this movie earns her change towards him. Her saying, "Come on, help," and coming together to work together.
It's a logical extrapolation from the first scene of this movie, which the movie is telling us is what happened in Terminator 2.
Right.
I have no problem with that. What did you think of the Ruffles, like encasing your technology in a bag of chips?
Right. Yeah.
Was that a nod to the past product placement in the series, or what was going on there?
If it is, it's certainly slyer than the, earlier movies.
Yeah.
Because I didn't take it as such. I like the line.
But I mean an actual sort of like pointing out like how broad we've been in our product placement. I mean, it is called back later in the movie.
Right.
Like Arnold says, if you hide your phone in a bag of chips, you deserve me to find you. You know,
It's a great line. Amazing.
Well, it's not quite that line, but it's something.
But something close to it, yeah.
Something close to that, yeah. And also, the idea of surveillance as being part of the machine threat now, that people can be tracked through GPS and found through their
Well,
phones.
and I mean, it's funny because none of the other movies make hay out of that, and even Genesis, which could and should have, considering what year it takes place in.
I know.
The other movies don't really have the opportunity. And so when you finally see it in this movie, it's actually really interesting, isn't it?
Yeah, exactly. I think that's it. This movie takes advantage of lots of missed opportunities on a thematic level. I think, on a symbolic level, a satirical level that we've only gestured towards before,
right?
Or we've been too interested in other things to focus on. I think maybe that's the. And credit to this movie that they can still have like a female sacrificial lamb, a la every 80s and 90s action movie, and yet still end up with an all-female cast.
Right.
Like the women in this movie. Well, Grace isn't really a woman either. That's reductive of me to say, but like, well, I guess she began life as a woman, so it's not. It's female identifying up to some point. That is like, we have this all-female action lead trio, which is in and of itself remarkable. But the movie kills off a woman, and we still end up with an all-female action team. I sort of think, bravo, you didn't take the easy way out.
Yeah.
You didn't kill off a woman so a man could take the spot. You just killed off a woman so two other women could thrive.
Right.
Well done. And different women of different ages and races as well. Like, it doesn't feel to me, maybe I'm easily impressed, but it doesn't feel tokenistic to me at all.
No, I don't
I mean,
think
these
so.
things never do to me. They seem to a lot of, white men on the internet.
Yeah.
But
well,
certainly in
the
this
last
context,
people we should be listening to, though.
Well, that's true. But tokenism is as bad as racism for me when I see it. But I just don't see it here. I think
I don't think so either.
It's just it's deliberate in a way that's like, especially in a series that has made some huge swings towards only white men can save humanity. That it is a very necessary course correction.
Absolutely.
This is absolutely the least they should be doing.
Well, and then so, I mean, within that, because we're there, do you like this last set piece, this last stand, the dam? How do you feel about the resolution of this movie?
Sometimes I feel like it's the storytelling in this series, not the characters, that are caught in a time loop. Because even Arnold Terminator, who is pretty much flawless in this movie, we still have him returning from the dead to save the day. It's like, do we have to keep circling back to these first few tropes, please?
Well, and so, but I guess it's a tale of two stories for me, because there are things going on dramatically that I like.
Yes, I agree.
And then there are things that I'm seeing on screen that I don't like, in terms of CGI and the whirly twirl, sort of, and sticking faces into it and getting stuck behind it, and all of that stuff. It feels tired.
Yeah.
But having said that, this movie also has what the original Terminator, and I think to a lesser extent, but that is there in Terminator 2 as well, is the idea in your mind of, how are we going to get out of this?
Yeah.
and so long as I'm on that plane, I always feel like, well, the movie's done its job. Now,
It's true.
how they resolve that, you know, is to varying degrees, say between Terminator 2 and this movie. And this movie would be last on the list for me, but it's also not as bad as Terminator 3 or Genesis. So, you know, it lies in the middle. There are good things, and there are things I wish were tweaked or looked better or that kind of thing. But dramatically, in terms of character, there are things going on that work for me.
Yeah. It's interesting how this movie ends as well, because it ends as Terminator 2 begins. Am I wrong? Like with the looking at kids in a playground,
Right?
Isn't that how Terminator 2 starts?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I know it's Grace. It's like young Grace.
Yeah.
Again, something they took from Genesis. Let's not forget.
Right.
This movie is still thinking about everything that it refuses
This
to
movie
acknowledge.
refuses to acknowledge, but also in Genesis, there's a, you know, John Connor, the sort of rise up on your feet.
Oh, yeah. You mentioned that. That's
you know,
true.
some of the bots in the future forwards do that in this movie. And so I always think, man, for a movie, movies you really are choosing to ignore narratively.
Yeah.
You're cherry picking some things that you like.
Yeah, exactly. And I think that's part of the problem with direct sequels. It's like that it all happened, and people know it happened,
but you refuse to
gonna...
acknowledge it happened.
Yeah. I don't know what my point was. What was my point? Oh yeah, it's the beginning. We've sort of reset to the beginning of Terminator 2, which is interesting. So maybe that goes with your theory that this is more like an original Terminator. And we've talked before about, if you see this as the third movie in the series, which it's claiming to be, then this is a trilogy. And then this is a trilogy. Trilogies tend to loop back to the original.
True.
But we've kind of looped back to the original, gone through the original, and we're at the beginning of Terminator 2 now.
Boy, did we loop.
Yeah. The only thing we're missing out is Terminator 2.
Yeah.
We began at the end of Terminator 2,
and now we're back at the beginning. You know, at least 5 minutes into Terminator 2.
Yeah. So that's all I had in terms of notes, apart from a credit check.
Well, that's where we are, sir.
Okay.
Talk to me about credits.
Credits. Crazy amount of names listed as writers.
Right.
And credit to the movie, it doesn't
feel like because that's a bad sign.
So many passes, but it obviously has. I thought there was some. I also commented on the weird geometry of Arnie and Linda Hamilton's billing on screen. I think there was an argument about who should come first, and they ended up with
one of those diagonal things.
Yeah, there's something weird going on there that suggests to me that lawyers were involved.
One's left and one's right, but one's high and one's low.
Exactly. And then my final note is just that the Latin guitar version of Terminator theme is absolutely gorgeous.
Nice.
It seems like it absolutely is one of the original pieces of music associated with the
series,
with the film. And of course, in keeping with the change of location. I don't know why the shift to Mexico doesn't bother me as much as the change to San Francisco in the last movie. Like, what? How is that? How is that any more or less arbitrary? And yet, this works. That doesn't.
Yeah, well, you know.
Is that just the story of Genesis?
I think so.
It's not that they've got the wrong idea. It's just that it's not good.
Well, and I think I'm not sure, because I think Genesis is more arbitrary because you choose to do it in the middle of your movie. This movie starts in Mexico.
Oh, but they show San Francisco blowing up at the beginning of Genesis, which says, like, when they have their, the standard apocalypse preview, that we have at the
Yeah,
beginning.
but what
of
I
each of
mean
these
is,
movies. We see San Francisco.
if you're gonna work so hard to redefine what happened in the first Terminator and refilm the entire front of that movie in Los Angeles, then it's a Los Angeles story.
Oh, I see what you mean. Yeah.
You know?
Yeah, no, maybe that's it then, because maybe it is
because
because we showed
Cyberdyne, or
San
whatever
Francisco blowing up.
Cyberdyne essentially is in Genesis, that was an LA business. Why are they all of a sudden in San Francisco in this timeline?
Well, it's the tech bubble.
All right, fine.
No, I don't know. No, but I remember because in the Apocalypse preview we see San Francisco like exploding, and I remember at the time in Genesis I remember thinking, why are we seeing San Francisco of all places go? And then in the second half of the movie it's in San Francisco. I'm like, oh okay, but this I don't know. This seems
nice.
This worked for me. Maybe it's just that little bit of gravy, you know?
Interesting.
A little bit of good filmmaking gravy. that the Terminator Genesis decidedly does not have.
Excellent. All right. Well, I think that's it.
Yep.
Another job well done, I say. Good on us. Ladies and gentlemen, you're going to have to tell us what you think of Terminator Dark Fate. Where does it fall in your ranking? Go ahead and find us on Facebook, Instagram, or Twitter. Send an email to everythingsequel@gmail.com, and we will respond. All right. For Tom Stewart of Lonesome Whistle Productions, Michael Shantz here of the How Dare You Awards. Join us next time. We're going to be pitching sequels. What the hell do you do with Terminator? Say goodbye, Tom.
Also, this is Texas. There's former Republican governor.
Yep.
Arnold Schwarzenegger.
Yep. That's great.
Commenting on modern day American gun culture.
Excellent. Excellent way to end it. All right, everyone. We will be back.